Knowledge and in Life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Thank you for joining us for today's show. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host for today, and we have three guests with us. First, we have Eleanor Reese, a volunteer, and we have Laura Campbell and her daughter, Lark Campbell. Thank you for joining us today. I noticed that in an Austin Metropolitan Ministries newsletter a few months back, there was an article describing your work, which we'll use as a starting off point. It says, this past summer, Eleanor Reese, along with Laura Campbell and Lark Campbell, spent the summer working with Mother Teresa in her orphanage and leprosarium. Eleanor is a co-founder and past director of the Project Foundation for the Homeless and a volunteer with Project Transition. Laura, you're a former deacon at Westlake Hills Presbyterian Church, and you and your daughter Lark are both volunteers at Project Transition. Lark, it says you're a senior at Westlake High School, and you worked in 1993 in Ecuador with Amigos de las Americas. Quite a background for all three of you. But going from Westlake to Calcutta is quite a step. I'd be interested in knowing, how did this come about?
Well, Eleanor and I are rollerblading partners. We rollerblade 15 miles every week, and while we do that, we solve the problems of the world. And one day we were just doing the what if game. If you could do anything in the whole world that you'd like to do, what would that be? And I threw out the line, well, I'd like to go visit Mother Teresa. And Eleanor goes, well, I want to come too. And never in our lives imagined that this would be something that would really come about. I just thought it was just an idea, just like all the ideas that we have, it would go away. And this one just didn't go away.
What's interesting about it, she has an 8-year-old daughter, and she felt like, well, she couldn't go until her child got older, because I have older children. And I said, well, Mother Teresa's in her 80s. If you want to go see Mother Teresa, we need to hurry. And so she just wrote in the back of a book the address and said, do you take volunteers? And we got a little typewritten letter back, not computer printout, mind you, typewritten, that said, we love volunteers. Come any day at 5 o'clock except Thursday and Sunday. And that was our directions. And then her husband...
Still didn't mean for it to happen,
right.
But just in talking at family dinners and all, my husband thought, well, if this is something you want to do, you should go for it. And he didn't let it drop. He kept saying, have you picked your dates to go to India yet? Have you decided? And Lark wanted to go immediately when she heard about it. So she was in on the trip, but I still, up until we left, I don't think I ever really planned to go.
And you went on the strength of a rollerblading experience and one letter. What was it about working with Mother Teresa? Because there are lots of places in the world, say, you could have gone. What was it for you, Lark, that was attractive about going to work with her?
Probably spiritually the most, in that she's known as like the living saint today, and we really look to her as a teacher in a sense, and a spiritual leader, and we just expected to learn so much from her and the other sisters when we went there.
She's always been my idol. I think a long time ago there was a PBS special, and it was even in the movie theaters, of Mother Teresa, her life, and I was so impressed the way that she can, no matter where she is, see the poor, see the suffering, see someone to go minister to, and she goes up and touches them and hugs them. And that impressed me so much. Years ago, when I was driving down 2nd Street and we see the guy standing at the street corner, before, I never noticed them. I don't think we noticed the poor people and the poverty and the suffering. We are very good at not noticing them. And then after seeing that PBS special, I started looking at those people differently. And I was so naive, I thought they just came out of their apartments to stand in the street corner for day labor. I didn't know they came out of the streets. And so that really, her PBS special prompted me to get over my fears, to first go do something about the homeless. So she's always been sort of my hero. I can't think of anybody else in the world I'd rather meet than Mother Teresa.
So. And so your wish came true on the strength of that one letter. So what were your preparations like to go for this? How long were you gone?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So what were your preparations like then for this 2-week experience?
shots.
We had to take a lot of shots. And then we collected things to take from Mother Teresa. We could take 2 suitcases, and 1 suitcase we took with clothes in it for us. The other suitcase we packed as many supplies and just things to take, medical supplies that we could find and gather, latex rubber gloves. What else did we take?
Toys.
Toys,
Candy,
and paper,
bubbles.
and colors, and pencils. I mean, I had written and asked what they needed and got this generic letter back that said anything would be fine. So we really didn't know what to take. And so we just kind of took what people gave us.
We read a lot about India, read the customs of India, what would offend them in dressing and their eating, and make sure you eat with your right hand and not your left hand. And that helped us a lot knowing the things, and it also frightened us a lot, because then we realized that, for instance, they view women like they see on soap operas from the United States. So they view mostly American women are very loose women, and we're sort of untouchables anyway because we don't have a caste. We're not in their caste system. So they're very curious about women, but they don't have a high regard for foreigners, and then women particularly. And so that added to our fear a little bit. The more we read, personally, the more frightened I got about going, to the point that before I left, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, before we left, I got so frightened that I wrote a goodbye letter to my family, asking them to forgive me if I don't come back. It just sort of like, but I was on focus, and I felt like God was calling us to do this, and this is something I was going to do, and I hope my family would forgive me if I didn't come back.
It was a big step. What about any help or support or questions or concern from, say, your local churches?
There was support. It was more of a, we just kind of did it, individually, but everybody, there was a lot of support about, giving money through us to give to Mother Teresa. It's very direct. You know that it's going to go to the poor, like when you just, hand the money over to her. And support in donating items. What did we get donated?
Yeah, our small
medical, we brought
people
gloves.
praying for us the whole time. The Austin Diagnostic Clinic gave us, Dr. Marietta gave us a lot of gloves to take over there, and our small group gave us money, and our families were so supportive. Like my husband, when I was getting afraid, and he's the most overprotective person in the world, and it's just amazing that he would even let me go. But when I was getting scared and crying, the day I was supposed to leave, he said he knows nobody else in the world more capable of meeting any situation that could come up than me. And so he really gave me a lot of encouragement that no matter what happened, we would be able to handle it. And Bob was...
He was so supportive. It was strange that he would be so supportive for us to go. His daughter and his wife to go off away from the rest of the family halfway across the world and be in conditions that we didn't know what they would be like. But he gave us free airline tickets and even first-class airline tickets. And just so supportive the whole way through. He came home every night. He travels a lot in his business, but he got very little sleep while we were gone because he wanted to be home to make sure everything was okay while we were gone.
It sounds as if then enough things fell into place that that was affirmation that this was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
We didn't even know if Mother Teresa would be in India. She has like 115 different countries she's in. She has something like 300 to 500 different mother houses that she has in the world. And so we had to go knowing that there was a good chance that we wouldn't even see Mother Teresa, but we'd be part of her ministry. And since we all worked with Project Transition and with AIDS and with homeless people, we really wanted to see how she accomplished this work with the poverty and the poorest of the poor, and they somehow stuck with it and didn't burn out. So we were going to do that whether she was there or not. We were just so thrilled that she was there.
Wonderful dream. Now, you've brought some pictures today to give us a sort of a peek at what your experience was like. Can you describe what we're seeing here?
This is the Taj Mahal lawnmower. We've got, this is really a culture shock when you go there. This is the train station, and 2 million people come in and out of the train station every day.
And all this is in Calcutta.
Well, the Taj Mahal was outside of Delhi in a city called Agra, this train station. This is also in Agra. The camel, you'll just look down the street and there'll be a camel pulling something, and then right in back of it will be a modern taxi.
This is the bridge across the Howrah, the Hooghly River. It just shows some passers-by.
And you're right, people everywhere.
This is the view from the top of Kalighat, Mother Teresa's home for the dying and the destitute. That little Coke stand there is where we get a Coke after working. It was so hot.
So her work is right in the neighborhood then.
And this is on the way, a little street to Kalighat. You had to walk. You got off the bus and you walked a little ways back into it. She goes to where the poor are. She doesn't bring them to her.
This is, since we read The City of God, we wanted to ride a rickshaw, and we wanted to make sure we rewarded them amply, and it was a horrible experience. So riding a rickshaw, to see somebody's back sweating trying to pull you. Laura and I tried to be as light as we could.
I'm sure you did.
It was
Straining over those
not a
bumps.
pleasant experience to do.
Quite a few cultural differences, I noticed. How was that for you, going into such a different environment?
Well, I had been accustomed to, going through culture shock, having been in Ecuador before, but this was a lot different, even still, because it's so poor. It's unbelievably poor. You'll see people on the streets washing themselves with ashes because they don't have soap, and there's no paper products, and you just see people living on the street, everywhere you look. And then, we stood out so much that, it was hard in that sense. Everywhere you went, you were just like on center stage. And
we were being stared at always. If we were in a bus or a train or a restaurant, and you could look around and everybody else in that bus or restaurant was just staring at us.
There aren't very many foreign visitors then that come to that part of Calcutta?
Not Calcutta. Calcutta is such, nobody would go to India, like touring India, to go to Calcutta because it's, for touring, it's so poor.
What was a typical day like for you once you got there?
We'd get up at about 4:30 or 5 a.m. and get dressed, and then we would take a taxi cab to the ashram, which is what they call Mother Teresa's mother house. And there we would have Mass in the morning, and a couple of times we got to receive the Holy Eucharist from Mother Teresa herself, which was such an experience for all of us. And what am I forgetting? Then after
we
Mass,
had breakfast.
the sisters would serve us breakfast, which consisted of bread, a little Manzano banana, and the Indian tea, which is a lot like the English tea. I think it's half tea, half milk, and real sweet. And then we would head out for wherever we were going to work that day.
There was no training. Like our very first morning, and we had signed up, they tell you all the different places that they do and where would you like to volunteer. There's volunteers from all over the world there, from speaking every different language. And if we said we wanted to be in the House of Dying, the directions were, right, go across the street, walk down the block, and stand there till a bus 402 comes, and when they yell Kalighat, get out and just walk down, or you'll find it. Ask
Just
somebody,
ask somebody.
where to go. And so you're walking into this building completely untrained, not knowing what to do, and you just sort of walk in there, and someone tells you where to put an apron on, and then pretty soon someone, like with me when I went in the House of Dying, they just stuck like this pipe pan, that's what their plates are, and told me to go feed this lady who's dying on the cot. And I was so impressed with how clean, no matter where her places are, it seemed very clean and seemed joyful. And all these could be tragic places. I mean, you think of the House of the Dying, people are dying of AIDS and cholera, malaria, TB, but there was a joyfulness in the people. They smiled at you. They have a way of communicating since we can't speak the same language. And you were just put to work. No rubber gloves. You just go feed this woman. And this woman I was feeding, they had, a spoon about this big, and she couldn't open her mouth. So pretty soon, I found myself, gathering the rice with my hands and putting it in her mouth. And the way she communicated, I realized I was just building the rice up in her mouth, and she wasn't chewing it till I would put a little piece of banana in, and then she would chomp and swallow. And so then I got the message real quick that she just wanted her banana, not her rice. But you really did feel like you were doing that for Christ. And that came out of the worship in the morning. We had the most beautiful prayers that we prayed after worship. And in Mother Teresa's chapel, she has great big words that I thirst by every crucifix around the world in the language that they're in. And that is her theology, is that when you take care of anyone suffering, whether from poverty or loneliness or whatever reason, you are taking care of the suffering Christ. And you, after coming out of a chapel, looking at those words, looking at the crucifix, reading the prayers that she has, and then when you go to do something, you really do feel like you're doing it to the suffering Christ, and it's a powerful feeling.
And you have, I believe, some other pictures of life in India and the work that you did. Here we go.
That's the leprosy. If the people don't have feet, they do handwork. If they don't have hand, they do feet work, and all the weaving throughout the world for Mother Teresa's saris and missionaries of charity is done right here, and they're paid. These are recovering lepers. There's somebody working on the sari of the missionaries of charity, like she wears. So you see how happy he is? It's a joyful place. They get paid to do this, and they're cured. That's at the same place. They're feeding the looms for their weaving.
This is in Shishu Bhavan, the orphanage in Calcutta, and there's Eleanor with lots of little children. The children just want to touch somebody. They want to have some body contact. And there we are dressing them in the morning after their baths outside. They just they don't have a hose. They don't have running water. They pour a bucket of water over their heads and scrub them down and then dress them from a big pile of clothes that have been washed. And there we are with laundry. We have to carry that clean laundry 3 flights up and lay them out on the top of the building to dry. And that's after we wash them with our feet, stomping around in the buckets and pouring the water out by hand and putting buckets in. And that's the laundry, the diapers drying on the roof.
And then the larger things we hung up on the wire, but the shorter things, and by the 4th load, the first would be all dry. And then
very hard work.
It's that's tea time up on the roof of the House with the Dying, and thank goodness for the British that we had tea time every day about 10 o'clock to take a little break. Do you see there's no chairs or tables anywhere? But you do get to take a break because it was unbearably hot there. That's a train that we took going to the leprosy place, and you just crowd in. They don't really stop. You just crowd in, jump on, and you sort of jump off when it's time, and people just keep on getting on and on and on. It seems like no one ever gets off, and so pretty soon you're being mashed by flesh everywhere.
This is washing dishes in the home. Callie got the Home for the Dying. You wash the dishes with ashes because they can't afford soap. And this is Mother Teresa and Eleanor and I, and she's so personable. She comes up to every person and like holds your hand and looks at you, and she has a really good sense of humor too. She's just so, you just see Christ in her when you look at her.
I see in those photographs a lot of joy, a lot of happiness. What was it really like?
It was tough and it was hard work, but let me tell you, there was joy there. If you go in the orphanage, there'd be 5 babies in a crib, but there were 5 happy babies in a crib, and they were being fed, and they were inside. We're outside in the street. The babies would not have it, and the families wouldn't have beds or cribs. They'd be lying on the street, and they might be eating banana peels, you know. And so all of her places were very joyful sanctuaries to be in. But personally, with the culture shock, it was hard labor for us. It was very hot. It was humid. We have never perspired so much in our lives. It was hard physical labor doing the laundry, washing dishes with ashes. I mean, it's just the priorities that they have there are so different than what we have, because her priorities is food and medicine. Clothes is not a priority. We bathed 150 children one Sunday, street kids, and most of them were naked. And I went up to one of the brothers of the Missionaries of Charity and asked, well, where do I find clothes for this little boy? And he looked at me and said, oh, if he came in naked, he has to leave naked. We have no clothes. And so it just made you realize the difference in priority. Yes, your food and medicine is the first priority. It was hard for us, but at the same time, joyful.
I can see this was a life-changing experience. We'll take a short break here just for a moment. to tell you a little bit about Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We'll be right back.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
Some time for more questions with Eleanor and Laura and Lark. What a life-changing experience. What difference has your summer, your 2 weeks made for you now? How are you changed, or how are your eyes opened?
Well, I think we found through watching the sisters work that how they don't get burned out when they work, and they don't, the strength that you see through them is from their faith, and how we can bring that back here and serve people that are not only just poor, literally poor, you know, for hunger and for clothing, but also of spirit and of loneliness, and to see that all around us, and to really serve them.
Because the question does come up. You were for 2 weeks in such desperate circumstances. What was it that kept you going, and what was it that keeps the sisters going? It is that faith. You said they worship twice a day?
Yes, they have Mass, Holy Mass in the morning, and then in the evenings, at the end of the day, they have adoration, where they pray the rosary and say prayers together in the presence of the Holy Eucharist. And it will sustain you. And then they worship all day during their work. When they're serving the poorest of the poor, the babies or the dying or the lepers, they are worshiping because they're serving Christ in his distressing disguise. And so it really, I think, helps us doing our volunteer work here, in that we can do that same sort of thing, is to worship Christ in his distressing disguise, and other people, the poorest of the poor, or just the lonely, people in nursing homes, or anyone who has need. And Mother Teresa, that's her message. She says, go to your own home. You don't have to come here to find the poor. They're all around you. All you have to do is open your eyes.
And I know you, Lark, brought some of the prayers that Mother Teresa prays. Would you share some of those? Because I think hearing her words would be a good inspiration.
Sure. I think the strongest prayer for us that really, you would say this before you were sent out to go work, is a St. Francis, I think, Cardinal Newman, and it's called Radiating Christ. Dear Jesus, help us to spread your fragrance everywhere we go. Flood our souls with your spirit and life. Penetrate and possess our whole being so utterly that our lives may only be a radiance of yours. Shine through us and be so in us that every soul we come in contact with may feel your presence in our soul. Let them look up and no longer see us, but only Jesus. Stay with us, and then we shall begin to shine as you shine. So to shine is to be a light to others. The light, O Jesus, will be all from you. None of it will be ours. It will be you shining on others through us. Let us thus praise you in the way you love best, by shining on those around us. Let us preach you without preaching, not by words, but by our example, by the catching force, the sympathetic influence of what we do, the evident fullness of the love our heart bears to you.
Thank you. You've been back now for a few weeks. How are you different people from the ones who went out?
I think we'll continue to change for a long time. But I know Eleanor and I have both felt a great need to simplify. The missionaries of charity are so frugal. They don't waste anything. They turn off the lights when they don't need to see to read. And so I know that has infected us. I run around my house turning off the lights that my 4 children leave on all the time, and just thinking even this little bit helps. And to get rid of so many possessions, because they really end up controlling you instead of leaving you free. And it ties up a lot of your resources. So I think that's something that has really affected me.
It makes you realize how much money we waste, and how much we could live, if we live simpler. That doesn't mean that money's bad, but we could do a lot better in the simplicity of living, and then we could use our money to better use and have more to give to people that need to give it. And her humility, it was so impressive to me. Here I think this is supposed to be one of the most important people in the world, but she was accessible to everybody and anybody. If a beggar rang the door and said, I want to speak to Mother, she was there. When she would come over to us and grab our hands and look at us as if we were the most important people in the world. She is accessible to the nuns, to tourists, to pilgrims, to beggars. There's no such thing as, well, let me look at my daytimer to see if I have time for that. And to me, she's just the living example of Jesus and Christ, and you really felt that holiness in her presence. She was just she just felt like she had all the time and the love for you. And if I could somehow remember that, and that's what we're all called to be doing.
And finally, what about your faith development?
I think it was a big strengthener for our faith. To see how their faith enables them to work with the poor, and to see the love that they possess for Jesus. It's so powerful, and it's incredible to witness and experience.
And also, we're all new Catholics, and a lot of and we came through Mary, and to see how much Mother Teresa loves Mary was sort of encouraging to me. And she would say, we do all for Jesus through Mary. And that was a good reaffirmation to my newly found faith. And that encouraged me a lot.
It's really inspiring for me, and I'm sure our listeners too, to hear stories of 3 ordinary Austin residents with an extraordinary experience and now a new sense of God's presence in their lives. We've been talking today with Eleanor Reese and with Laura Campbell and with Lart Campbell, hearing something about how their lives have been changed and their newfound devotion to God and to the church. We hope you've been inspired listening to their inspiration. We also hope you'll join us next week for the next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.